Hello everybody and welcome to the Crazy Carnivore channel. I am your host, Rob Shaloway. Now on today's video, I'm going to show you how I process my whitetail back straps. Now I know a lot of people will butterfly them and package them individually as steaks. I don't do that. I never have, I never will. I'll cut and trim those back straps and vacuum seal them in 8 to 9 inch sections, depending on the size of the whitetail itself. But typically, we're talking a good section, and that's the way I'll cook it, smoke it, grill it, whatever I'm going to do. I almost never will cut it into little steaks. I'll cook it whole and eat from there. But that's just my personal preference. But that's not what this video is about today. What this video is about is showing you how I trim them out and the little extra bonus I get while I'm doing it. Now, I've already trimmed one back strap, and you can see in this bowl is what I'm talking about is a little bonus. So what we'll take here, as you can see, is from a whitetail doe. Now, this is a silver skin. For you people that have never processed a deer before or have cut one up, this is the back strap. This is the muscle that runs along the spine of the deer, and this here is what we call silver skin. Now, this is really strong and thick. It's not palatable at all. So what we're going to do is trim the meat from this, but I'm going to show you how I do it. So what we'll do is we'll lay this strap down on the cutting board, go over it, make sure there's no hair, anything foreign that I need to be concerned about. And I'll usually start right out in the middle of this back strap, and I'll cut down. But you see me, I'll stop at the silver skin or just above it, and I'll turn my knife blade and I'll go down. But what I'll do is I'm going down, I'm pressing down, keeping pressure on this meat so it stabilizes it. And then as I get towards the end, I'll lift that blade even a little bit more, and we'll come out. Now, look at that. Gorgeous piece of meat, and there's just one little chunk of silver skin. We'll get that, and then we'll get to this side in a minute. Now, I'm going to lay that there just for a second. Now, what I was talking about earlier is taking this meat that I didn't get on the first pass, and see how thin and gorgeous that is? It's awesome. And even right here is just a little bit of silver skin. I'll take just a little bit of that off. And look at that. I mean, that's actually a good piece of meat to make as jerky. That's perfect. But the back strap, no, this goes in the old bowl here with the Korean barbecue. And I'll get to this. I'll explain this in a minute. But we're marinating this, the trimmings that I'm not going to vacuum seal in Korean barbecue. And I'll get into that in just a minute. But you can see here, all this meat, I'm going to trim off really quick and get it right in that bowl. Now, you'll notice when I'm cutting that my right hand will never, ever touch any of this meat until I'm ready to put it in the vacuum seal bag and put it back here. You can see my vacuum sealer back here. I'll do it then. But what we'll do now is flip this back the other way. I'm right-handed, so I'm always going to cut from left to right when I'm doing this. That's just the way it goes, but you can see how fast I come through here. I'm using a different knife. Both these knives are perfect. This is a Cutco unit, but you can see how flexible that is. And when you're doing back straps, or if you're just trimming meat in general, it's always good to have a knife with a flexible blade. You don't need a stiff knife. It's working against you. So once again, you can see how nice this is. And look at all this meat that I have left over. But once again, to me, that's not a negative. I do that on purpose. I've always have since I started processing my own deer and cooking for myself. I don't let anybody touch my venison and cook it. I do it because I know what's best for it. So I spent years in my mind perfecting how to cook whitetail. So there's no need for anybody else to be touching this but me, except when they're going to eat it, because usually when I cook it, people are pretty excited about it. So you see, just a little bit of fat there. We're going to get this out of here because we're not going to let this go to waste. You got to be mindful, like there's some clotted stuff right there. Check it out, good. Perfect. Now, most people think this meat is gamey or whatever. I absolutely despise that word, gamey. Venison tastes like venison should, but most people, in my experience, growing up, that most people don't know how to prepare it. They overcook it. They just fry it. I don't even know, but I've had plenty of experiences of other people cooking venison, and I get what somebody else might be thinking. That is gamey, but they just don't know how to prepare it and what seasonings to go along with it. It takes some experience and time to do there. It doesn't happen overnight to learn how to cook a meat that's temperamental like this, but once you perfect it, there's nothing better really. So anyways, we're gonna get into this real quick. Shave that off. I'm gonna take this whole chunk off really quick because I don't like it looking funky. And then I'm just gonna lightly come across this silver skin on this side and shave it off as close as I can on this side now, because I've already got the gold per se in this bowl. And then technically, other just little bits here and there of fat that's left over. Once again, whitetail fat's not something you really want to eat. I mean, it's obviously not going to hurt you, but it doesn't have the same flavor as, let's say, a pork fat, because that's why bacon's awesome, right? Fat tastes good in it. Same thing with beef. Beef's really good, and it's good for you, believe it or not. But okay, so here you go. We got a finished back strap. It's ready to go and be packaged. Now we'll get onto this one, what we've already gone through. Now this one has, you can see this little vein of essentially fat or silver skin in it, and we're just going to leave it. We're not going to mess with it. It's right in the center, but we are going to trim this excess off. We'll get to that in a second. And then I'll come across, this is where the blades being flexible is really helpful to you, because I'm pressing on the board and I'm not putting the pressure on the meat and digging into it. I'm trying to come down lightly as I can with this blade and just getting the edge of this meat, because I'm not digging in. I'm letting the cutting board be my guide, and it determines how much pressure I put on that blade to cut that meat. Same thing like this. Once again, I'm right-handed, so I'm always going to cut from my left to my right. Now this time we're getting a lot of meat, but once again, as I'm looking at what I'm cutting, I did it on purpose, like this right here. That's not going to waste. It's going right in that bowl. It's all going to get cooked in the final. So here we go. Back strap, done. Now this piece of meat, once again, this side looks perfect. This side needs a little bit of doctoring. So once again, I'm pushing really hard on this knife and letting it float and flatten that meat out. So I'm just shaving the top, as you can see. And you see I get it all, once again, letting my knife do the work. And that right there, gorgeous little piece of backstrap going right in the bowl. And then I'll get back to all my stuff that I've trimmed off. Just making sure there's nothing bad in it, nothing ugly. Like right here, we got a little bit of clot. No big deal, but at the end of the day, I'm staying here with a knife, cut it off. And I think this is about it right here. I'm going to go back in, shave this down like I did as if it was a big piece. Now this is a good chunk of meat. This I'll actually, you know what? No, we're gonna cut it into little strips so it's thin. And the key to the way I cook this is not to have any thick pieces. It's got to be really thin for what I'm doing. And I'll explain that once again in a minute when we get to it. But you want that meat as thin as possible. I'm not talking paper thin. I'm talking like throw it in a frying pan. It'll cook. Venison cooks so quick because there's no fat. You know, give it a little sear on either side for, just seconds. And at the end of the day, it's done at that point, because when we throw it in, with what I'm gonna tell you about, it still cooks in the end a little bit more. So there you go. We got all this done. You know, and now here's what we're not gonna. I am gonna vacuum seal these, but let me tell you something. This is the inner loin of a whitetail, right? Now they're super temperamental, and what I mean by that is when you harvest a whitetail, depending on how it expires, sometimes will determine on how this actually tastes. And I know that sounds a little bit funny, but you know, if that animal dies a certain way, let's say it's gut shot or whatever, I mean, these things are in direct line and direct fire in the inner part of that deer to its organs. So anything happens to those that are negative, a lot of times it'll negatively affect this meat. And or even when somebody's field dressing a whitetail, which I almost never do anymore, depending on where I'm at, a lot of times I'm processing my animal in a controlled environment on an electric hoist. I'm spoiled. And we're doing it inside. Everything's clean. There's no dirt, debris, leaves, sticks, dirt. I mean, nothing gets it into the inside of that deer when I'm processing it. So I typically always in a clean environment. Sometimes that doesn't always happen, and that's the way it goes. But the majority of the time, I'm processing my animal in a clean environment. So here's the inner loin. And also, you know, things, you know, sometimes people that don't maybe hunt as much as I do, or, you know, they don't process a deer, or multiple deer, I should say, a year like I do, right? It's not a second nature to them. So when it comes to processing the animal in the field, I've seen some real, you know, horror shows per se. When you look at it, like, oh my God, it looks like somebody took an axe to that animal instead of a sharp instrument. But with that being said, what I'm getting to is that if you were to poke a bladder, let's say, which happens to people all the time because that's where they really don't know what they're doing. And I don't mean that negatively. I mean, that's just the way it is. And that urine these inner loins are in that same area. So when that urine gets on this, that's what they're going to taste like, because these things are like sponges. So any negative thing that happens to that deer happens to these. It's just, more times than not, these get spoiled rather quickly. And it's a shame because they're amazing. But in this case, like these, you know, when you harvest that animal, cut these out, or when you're going to cut these up, you can smell them. And if you don't smell anything, they're pretty good. I mean, they're going to be just fine, hopefully. But once again, just FYI, inner loins are extremely susceptible to being affected negatively in the process of harvesting that animal and processing it. So, you know, processor beware, I guess. So, but we're not going to mess with these right now. We're just going to cut these up. They're ready to go. I'm going to freeze them. Usually, what I'm going to do is, what I intend to do with the inner loins, because to me, they're not big enough to have a dinner with. I mean, to me, that's like an appetizer, right? And you can see, look at that in the shot. You know, a little bit of silver skin almost like that on that. But we're not going to mess with that right now. What's going to happen with these is I'll vacuum seal them, and I'm going to put them in a stew. So I'll get a crock pot, and I'll take these and some vegetables and, you know, the whole thing, what you typically do with a stew. But I've added a new ingredient that I've come across just wandering down the aisles of a grocery store this year, and saw something, and I just kind of, little light bulb went off my head. I went, And it's something similar to this. But we'll get into that in another video. But right now, as you can see, I just add a little bit more the Korean barbecue, or marinade, I should say. It's both, right? But you use the Japanese style one from Kinder's that has ginger in it. It's amazing. And just about anybody else so far that I've tested anyway, Korean style marinade barbecue has been wonderful on venison. I mean, I've cooked this stuff out on an open flame after I've marinated it for a couple minutes even. And I'm talking guys that are experienced in hunting and, been eating venison for years. And I've cooked this on an open flame and handed it to them, and the look on their faces, and they go, "What is that?" I'm like, "It's venison." They're like, the look on their face, they're just perplexed because it's so amazing. Like, it can't be. I'm like, it is. And then they watch me cook it, and they're like, "I've never had it like that before." I'm like, exactly. But it's amazing because what I'll do with this also is make a rice, sometimes just that cheap box Lipton, Asian style, Asian inspired rice. Take stir fry vegetables, saute them with butter, and a little bit of garlic or whatever. Cook them in a separate pan, cook the rice in a separate pan, and then cook this on the grill or however in a frying pan. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll cook this in a frying pan, and the marinade that's in the pan left over, I'll add the vegetables to that and saute the vegetables where the meat has been already in this Korean barbecue, just to kind of get that flavor in those vegetables. And then I'll put them in the rice, and then I'll add the meat and just kind of mix it up and bury it and just let it cool down. So let all that rice and vegetables soak in all that flavor together for a little while, let it cool down. And when it's done, it's absolutely amazing. It's absolutely just wonderful to eat. So anyways, what we're going to do now is, because these back straps, this particular one, the size of it, I'm going to cut this in half, then I'm going to cut this in half. And what I'm going to do is just take one fat section, one skinny section, and vacuum seal together. The inner loins I'm going to put together. I've already made bags, vacuum seal. If you don't have a vacuum sealer and you're cutting your own meat, I don't know what to tell you. If you're just wrapping this in paper and throwing it in the freezer, I hope you're eating it within months, the year. I mean, it's possible to make it last, but let me tell you something. It's always good to vacuum seal stuff if you can. It's the best way to preserve it. There's no air. Hopefully you never have any frostbite issues. I will tell you some of the things I do would be to, even though it's in a vacuum seal bag, you can still get some freezer burn, depending on the freezer and the way you have it set up. But I've seen meat in vacuum sealed bags get damaged. So typically what I'll do is either, if you have a chest freezer or even a stand-up one, you can do a couple things. One would be to grab a cardboard box, and once these are vacuum sealed, put them in the box, right? It's still going to obviously freeze, but you're getting that harsh, dense, frigid air away from directly touching this, in a sense. That box kind of acts as a insulation, but yet it's still obviously going to freeze. But it seems to prevent freezer burn. Also, a paper sack, like an old grocery bag. I know those are few and far between anymore, but a lot of companies are starting to actually bag their groceries. Want paper or plastic? Use paper. Get a couple of them. Put all your meat in the paper, fold it, and put it in the drawer, wherever it is in your freezer, and do it that way. So I'm going to vacuum seal one of these, give you an example. Now you can see way down here, and it's bagged up here. Obviously, I wrote on this, so I'm going to cut it in the vacuum sealer above that line just a little bit. I don't need this whole big bag, so let's do that real quick. There. I cut off the excess, slide it down. Get the vacuum sealer. And once again, usually what I'll do while this is marinating and I get done, this will go straight from this bowl into a frying pan and get cooked. Or I'll do it the next day. But I am leaving town tomorrow, so tonight I might even, you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to vacuum seal this because the time it is, I just went out to dinner, so there's no excuse for me to cook this and eat a big meal. And I'm leaving town early in the morning, so I'm going to vacuum seal this with a marinade. And when I'm ready to cook that, I'll do a video on this. We'll see how this turns out after being vacuum sealed for however many days or weeks. And we'll do a video on that and try it then. I'll show you how I do the whole process of the Asian-inspired venison stir-fry is usually what I call it. Venison stir-fry. And sometimes I'll even go get shrimp and do the same thing. Marinate them in that Korean or Japanese-style barbecue and cook the shrimp. So I'll have venison and shrimp. Once again, it's just amazing. So there you go. I won't bore you with the other vacuum seal of those, but look, this is what we got. I'm going to put it in the freezer, fold it up, put it in a bag, or put it in a box in my stand-up freezer. And it could be 2030 before I see this again. I literally have back straps in my freezer that are 5 years old sometimes before I get to them. But when I pull them out, they are exactly the way they went in. They look like I vacuum sealed them yesterday. There's no brown spots. There's no freezer burn spots. They literally look like I just cut them up that day. And you'd never know. They're just amazing. So anyways, thanks for watching this video. I'll catch you on the next one. Once again, I'll do some videos on how I cook and process, other than process, and I'll show you how I cook this venison and prepare it for meals. But I just wanted to do a real quick video on how I process my back straps myself. And they're amazing. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you on the next one.